So our keynote speaker is Alexander Pruss from Baylor University in Texas. Alex is 7 hours behind us, so probably he's sleeping right now, but he will wake up to answer the question after the lecture, which will have around 40 minutes. And the lecture is titled God and Beauty.
I would like to start by thanking the organizers for arranging this wonderful and very important conference, and for giving me the honor of an invitation to the beautiful city of Krakow, where it would have been nice to give a talk on God and beauty. Alas, I shall have to give this talk remotely from Waco, Texas. Among the arguments for the existence of God, some are abstruse. They are of appeal mainly to logicians and philosophers and the like. Gödel's ontological argument is the example par excellence of this. Such arguments do not move almost anybody, and perhaps anybody, in the direction of faith. On the other hand, many religious people are very much pulled by this conviction that the world around them is deeply beautiful, and that this beauty tells the glory of God, as the Psalm says. At the very least, we can say that psychologically, the beauty of the world makes it easier to believe in God. The question before us today, however, is not about whether psychologically it does so. I shall assume it does, and it will in fact be a part of one of the arguments, but whether the beauty of the world, as well as other considerations having to do with beauty, provide an epistemic reason to believe in God, whether they provide at least a little bit of evidence for the existence of God. How much will be a good question to ask during the discussion. I'm going to sketch 3 families of epistemic reasons connected with beauty and directed at the existence of God. The first will be based on the very concept of beauty. The second will be based on the empirical fact that we have a sense of beauty. And the third will be based on the arrangement of the world, which is what you might call friendly to beauty. It has lots of beauty in it, but not only that, it makes that beauty accessible to the intelligent beings in that world, at least the ones we know, namely ourselves. And then I will end by comparing the argument from beauty with the argument with design arguments, and discuss the problem of evil and whether it has an analog in the problem of ugliness. And I shall argue that the problem of ugliness is much less problematic than the problem of evil is. So let's start with an observation about beauty. Beauty is extremely diverse. So Plato says in the Symposium that one progresses, ideally, from one body to 2 in appreciating beauty, and from 2 to every lovely body, from bodily beauty to beauty of institutions, from institutions to learning, and from learning in general to the special lore that pertains to nothing but the beautiful itself. We do indeed pursue beauty wherever we can find it, and we pursue it as if it was something that mattered to us, as indeed it does. The diversity of beauty is bewildering. Here is a beautiful person, a beautiful human being. But is the face beautiful? Maybe, but in a very different way from that in which, presumably, Helen of Troy was beautiful. Here's a different beauty. Also, this is a purely physical kind of beauty. Another one. And one that is brought forward by an artist. Here's something very different, but also beautiful. Jackson Pollock's work. Here is something much more humdrum, but still has a kind of beauty to it, the beauty of fine industrial design, which highlights how important beauty is to us, how much we want to be surrounded by beautiful things, even in everyday activities. There's mathematical beauty, sometimes of a sort that's not that different from the beauty we find in the universe around us, the beauty of leaves that are symmetrical or nebulae that are colorful. But sometimes we have abstract forms of beauty that we cannot express very well in pictures, where the true beauty is much more abstract. We can express it in words, or at least we can express the thing that has the beauty in words. Maybe the beauty itself we may not be able to express in words. Maybe we can only grasp at it once we've expressed the thing itself in words. But those words are also words of a highly technical language, the language of mathematics, for example. We have the beauty of poetry, which has two forms. There's the beauty of poetry as the sounds, the play of sounds, the beautiful sounds, which cannot be translated from language to language, which we have in the top of this picture. Or we have the beauty of the meanings of those sounds, the interplay of meanings that we have at the bottom, preserved in translation. We have the beauty of mathematical proofs, which is very different from the beauty of mathematical objects, like the Lie group G2, for example, or like the fractal that I showed earlier. The arguments themselves can be beautiful. We have a twofold beauty in the laws of nature. One kind of beauty found in them is that the laws, considered as abstract statements, have a kind of elegance and compellingness and beauty to them. But second, they are true. And the fact that the world exemplifies those elegant statements makes the world more beautiful. We have the beauty of mathematical facts. There's something particularly beautiful about the fact that there are only 5 Platonic solids. You'd kind of think maybe there's like none, or 1, or infinity. But no, there are 5. Mysterious, but provable. So we have beauty coming to us in a manifold nature. We can divide it up into 3 categories. The concrete, where we have natural laws considered as true, not just considered as abstractions. Natural functioning, natural objects, and natural landscapes and other scapes. Communities, institutions, customs, laws that we have created for ourselves to govern ourselves by. Arts, connected to senses, visual, auditory, olfactory, tactile, and gustatory, and with the 2 kinds of aspects that we saw in Mickiewicz. There's the sensory aspect, how it sounds or feels, and then there's the meaning behind it. We have actions, performances, even whole lives. After all, what is beautiful about Mother Teresa most is her life and thoughts. And of course, at sort of the summit of the concrete, if he exists, is God. But then we have abstract things that are beautiful. Theorems, proofs, mathematical objects, theories and arguments, in mathematics and elsewhere, plots, settings, and characters. Here I'm thinking of literature, film, and so on. Platonic objects, like the Lie group G2, if there are Platonic objects. And then we have combinations. We have expressions or echoes of one kind of beauty and another kind of beauty. For example, of a natural, concrete beauty in an artistic creation. We have conjoinings of instances of the same and of different kinds of beauty. We have the meal prepared by the wonderful chef, where each item in the meal is beautiful and combines gustatory, olfactory, and visual and tactile beauty. And then the different parts of the meal themselves combine into a whole meal. So we have got this vast array of beauty. And I went on and on and on just to emphasize how vast it is. And we now have the deep question. What do all of these things, which seem so very different in kind, maybe even crossing ontological categories, what do they have in common? That is the question of the concept of beauty. We have two kinds of answers we could try to give. One kind of answer involves the character of the beautiful thing itself. And the three main suggestions that have been made are, it's a brute feature. It just happens to be beautiful. There's nothing more to be said. It cannot be analyzed. It's just some things are beautiful and some things are not. That's all there is to it. Or perhaps it has to do with proportion. Plato may have thought this. There's like a mathematical characterization we can give of the beautiful. Or perhaps it is goodness that makes things be beautiful. But there's another approach, perhaps a more modern one. It's not so much the thing that is beautiful. Well, the thing is beautiful, but what makes the thing be beautiful is its relationship to something else. And here we have three primary options for what that thing it is in relationship to is. Us, the perceivers, the creators of the beauty, which could be us, but could be something other than us as well. Or it could be a particular metaphysically or ethically special being, like God. The last of these 6 kinds of answers explicitly invokes God. I'm going to argue that some of these answers are not very compelling, and that the best versions of all of the ones that are pretty good lead in some way to God. So let's go through them. Brute feature theories. That's one of the ones I don't like. And I don't like it because it's giving up. It's a surrendering. Brute feature theories should always be our last resort, philosophically speaking. We should try to give explanations. Maybe we will fail, but last resort. Proportion theories. They just fail. Think back on the pictures I showed. There isn't mathematical proportion in a number of these. Think of the beautiful arguments or the beautiful lives. You can kind of stretch maybe the concept of proportion to get some of those, but it is a stretch, and it's a stretch that will not actually let you distinguish the beautiful from the ugly. The best hope for a proportion theory is classical art, and even there, it fails to correctly predict which pieces of classical art are beautiful and which are merely technically adept. The good is particularly promising among the theories focusing on the character of the beautiful thing. I think it's promising because the good involves a similar kind of diversity to beauty. There are so many very different kinds of things that are good. Indeed, all of the things in the categories I listed earlier can also be good. So the goodness theory starts out well. It does justice to the diversity of the good in a way that proportion theories do not. It's an underappreciated theory, and I think the main reason it is not appreciated is because of a focus by thinkers on things that are beautiful but evil. For example, Leni Riefenstahl's propaganda film Triumph of the Will. It has a kind of beauty to it, but it is promoting the horrible Nazi ideology. I think the goodness theorist may have some ways out of this. First of all, the goodness theorist can point out that often in a beautiful work that is serving something evil, there's a good respect in it. For example, in Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, there is the goodness of the camaraderie between workers. A camaraderie that the Nazis and the communists then distort. But nonetheless, the camaraderie in itself is a good thing and is shown as good, albeit in a distorting context. Secondly, and more radically, one could simply say, nah, that thing that you said was beautiful but wasn't good, it's not beautiful. It looks beautiful, but it isn't. It's just an illusion. It's an illusion, it looks beautiful, it looks good, but even though it looks good and looks beautiful, it isn't. It's deceitful. It's mere propaganda. It appears to be beautiful, but isn't. So I think that there is an answer for the good theorist who says that the good is the beautiful to the problem of evil works. But, and it's a solution that I myself will want to adopt. I will want to adopt both of these kinds of solutions for my preferred theory. But I think there is another problem with simply identifying the good and the beautiful. The beautiful pulls on us. It pulls on us, on our hearts, in a kind of more visceral, more mysterious way than the good does. And it points beyond itself, more directly, more fully than the good, or maybe I should say more obviously than the good does. So there's something not quite there in the good theory. Only if the good is seen as somehow pointing beyond itself, pointing to something deeper, like maybe God, is the good theory of the beautiful very plausible. What about the theories that relate the beautiful to the subject and make it be beautiful because it is perceived in a certain kind of way, for example? So we have subjectivist theories. The beautiful is what we perceive as beautiful, or we are attracted by. Now, the attraction theory is implausible. Morbid curiosity can attract us to the ugly, qua ugly. The perception theory seems to require there to be something like a quale, a subjective kind of feeling of beauty. But the problem of the diversity of beauty comes back at the level of this quale. For there isn't a single feeling, a single kind of quale that one has in one's mind when one listens to Beethoven's Ninth or eats a piece of culinary art or reads a mathematical proof. So given the diversity of the beautiful, the idea that there's some kind of perceptual element in common between all of them seems to me implausible. The attraction theory didn't have this problem because we can be attracted to a variety of different things. But maybe we should be a little more intellectual about this perception. Maybe it's more of an intellectual perception than something sensory where there's a quale. Let's think about that kind of version. The subjectivism can come in different levels of subjectivism. You could have a particular level subjectivism. Every particular thing perceived as beautiful is beautiful to the perceiver. You could have a rules theory. As a society, or as a human race, we have rules of beauty that we have socially instituted, and everything that accords with those rules is beautiful because it does so. So the beauty is explained in terms of us, the perceivers, the social perceivers. Or we could have a subtler theory, a kind of version of David Lewis's theory of laws of nature, on which those things that are beautiful are precisely the ones that are going to get counted as beautiful by the best systematization of our judgments of beauty. Our social judgments. I don't think any of these three theories is very promising. First of all, the particularist theory fails from the problem of bad taste. It cannot explain what it is for somebody to have bad taste. Because the person who allegedly has bad taste, their judgments of beauty are just as true for them as for anybody else, as anybody else's are for them. The particularist theory does not make possible error, and yet error as to beauty is clearly possible. The rules and patterns theories are too extrinsic. They ground beauty in society. Now suppose that I am far from society perhaps, maybe on an island, and I'm contemplating some piece of beauty. And while I'm doing so, there's great social change going on away from where I am, and the rules change. How people view beauty changes. Surely, my judgment that say this landscape is beautiful or ugly doesn't change in truth value just because far away people are starting to talk differently and starting to appreciate things differently. There should be something more intrinsic about beauty. It should be sort of closer to the perceiver and the perceived, rather than grounded in faraway contingent things. The subjectivist theories also make it somewhat mysterious why beauty matters. They have to talk about contingent benefits. And it seems like there's more to the importance of beauty than that. Here's another option. Maybe the beauty is relative, but not to a society, but to a kind of perceiver, a natural kind of perceiver, such as a human being. The beautiful relative to humans is maybe what a properly functioning human perceives as beautiful. Now there's room for error. Some humans are not properly functioning. Their judgments don't matter. There are some problems with this, too. Given the great diversity of kinds of beauty, it would mean that the human nature somehow has to have this vast set of norms embedded in it as to what to judge as beautiful. And if these norms are merely random, then why should beauty matter to us like it does? Theism here can help. If you have this theory about, say, that our nature is an image of God, and that God, from amongst the infinitude of possible natures, chooses which one to instantiate, and does so wisely, and in part so that their perceptions of beauty might have a certain kind of coherence and diversity, then we can have a kind of answer to the question of why beauty still matters. Second problem, it seems that very plausible that just as there's beauty that some people, like me, cannot appreciate because they are tone deaf, musical beauty, there should be beauty that no humans can appreciate at all. There is a solution here. Maybe you could say the beautiful there's such a thing as the beautiful simplicator, and it is what is beautiful relative to some kind or other. And so for every kind of beauty, there's a kind of being, a possible kind of being that would appreciate it. One problem is this may let too much in. Now it seems like, couldn't you imagine a kind of being that appreciates pretty much anything? And so now it seems everything is beautiful simplicator. And then by parallel, ugly simplicator, because it could be disappreciated by some possible being. Again, if God exists, we might have a solution to this problem, because we might say natural kinds necessarily are images of God. And not every combination of judgments could be natural to some kind of being. Certain combinations just couldn't be there because they could not be found in a nature that reflects God. We might try to say that what makes something beautiful is a certain connection to its creator. I think the most serious problem of that is that a creator is beautiful in creating. And this leads to an endless regress. You might say it leads to God, but it will push past God. It'll ask, where's God's beauty come from? Or what makes God beautiful? It has to be that God has created by something else, and beauty comes from the creator of the beauty. That leads to vicious regress. So I want to consider the sixth of the theories. It's a very strange kind of theory. The idea is this. God, take this word divine. God is divine fundamentally. But everything that participates in God is divine derivatively. It doesn't mean it is God, but it is derivatively divine. When we perceive something as beautiful on this theory, we are perceptually representing it as divine. The beautiful is the divine. This explains the attraction of beauty without making it be non-rational or merely contingently beneficial. For we are drawn to the divine if there is a divine. It explains the mystery of beauty and the way beauty points beyond itself, or at least the way created beauty, the beauty all around us, points beyond itself. What kind of theory of God does this require? That's a question for further investigation. Prima facie, it seems to work with classical theism, which I think is the correct theory, but it also may work with panentheism and at least some varieties of pantheism. In all these cases, we could talk of the beautiful as the derivatively divine or fundamentally divine. This coheres very well with the well-known cross-cultural link between religion and beauty, the focus on beauty in all the religions that we know of. Let's look at some objections. Problem 1. Atheists appreciate beauty. But if beauty is supposed to be if perceiving beauty is perceiving divinity, then that means atheists are perceiving divinity, and that seems false. Well, we have to be careful. Perceptual representation is not conceptualization. When we see red, I think we are perceptually representing it as giving off light in a certain wavelength range, but we're not conceptualizing it as such. That's just what it means for it to be red. But we are not aware of that, always. Problem 2. It seems a little extrinsic that beauty would be connected to God in this way. Isn't it that the Rocky Mountains, for example, or the Tatras, are beautiful in themselves, and not just in connection with God? Well, here I think we want to say this. Participation in God is very intimate. The very nature of creatures and their accidents is to be by participation. If an instance of green or of beauty did not participate in God, its very being would be radically different. So it is actually, maybe in some sense it's extrinsic, but it is also, in some sense, deeply intrinsic. Here's another problem. Doesn't this make for too much beauty? On classical theism, everything is God or participates in God. So everything is beautiful. Maybe. Two options to get out of this. First, let's relativize this theory a little bit. Beauty to a kind of being, K, is a divinity perceivable by beings of kind K. Then maybe we could say that everything is beautiful simplicator, but not to humans. Humans are not capable of recognizing the divinity of everything. And so some things aren't just not beautiful to humans, but they are beautiful to some possible kind of being. Another option, everything is beautiful, even a dead cat, but we have to see it the right way, see it in its divinity, and that's difficult. And of course, participation in God can come in degrees, and so can beauty. We also have the problem of evil beauty, which I think can be handled in ways very similar to the problem of evil beauty in connection with the good theory of beauty. So I think some of these theories that we had have promise, but all the ones that have promise involve God, at least as a way of responding to some objections. And hence we have an argument for the existence of God based on the concept of beauty. Let's quickly think about some other arguments. Here's something indisputable. We have a sense of beauty. We have the sense whether or not the sense is objective or not. Even if there is no such thing objectively as beauty, we still have a sense of beauty. And it's still a puzzle why we have it. We need an explanation. For moral and epistemic norms, we can give some kind of good evolutionary story as to the benefits of thinking clearly and acting in ways that benefit society. And so we can give an evolutionary explanation of how we got the sense of the morally right or the epistemically proper. In the case of beauty, we can speculate. Mate selection. The beauty of fruit, which are also good for us. Expensive mating displays and the like. But yet, so much of the beautiful seems useless, or at least was useless to us at the stage at which evolution was particularly busy with us. Take the beauty of highly abstract mathematical objects, which we knew nothing about when human beings were evolving from other species. Moreover, so many forms of beauty are tied to the harmful. Think of tigers or the beauty of mountains from which you can fall. We can try to come up with speculative evolutionary theories about the sense of beauty. I am not particularly convinced by these, and I think they're not going to cover all the cases of beauty. We can again discuss this during the discussion if we wish. What about God? Can we give a God-based explanation to a sense of beauty? Well, yes. But it will be different depending on whether beauty is objective or not. if beauty is objective, then God has a reason to give us a sense of beauty so that we might recognize this objectively important and good thing. But if beauty is subjective, God still might have a reason to give us a sense of beauty, for it might be that the sense of beauty leads us to activities that are valuable. So theists can actually accept a number of the evolutionary kinds of stories you might give about social cohesion, mate selection, healthy food, relaxation, etc. And they can add a further story about the religious pull of art, which pulls us to recognizing divinity. So even if evolution can give a partial explanation, evolution plus theism can give a better one. You might worry a little bit. What if beauty seduces us away from the good? Maybe that's a reason for God not to give us a sense of beauty. I think it's outweighed, but it's worth thinking about. And the third argument. The third argument is the most straightforward one. It is the one that actually most people who are drawn by beauty to God make, implicitly or explicitly. It's, why is there so much beauty around us? Vast beauties like galaxies, tiny ones like atomic structures, structural ones like laws of physics, abstract ones in mathematics. But also there's another aspect that is a little bit less thought about. Why are there any beings capable of appreciating, creating, and uncovering beauty? Here we get back to evolution and fine-tuning. Well, there are many reasons for God to make there be beautiful things, and to make us be capable of accessing them and seeing them as beautiful. Beauty points beyond the everyday and draws us to God. It's objectively good, arguably, and so is its appreciation. And even if it's not, it's an innocent pleasure, and innocent pleasures are good, and God wants us to have goods. Perhaps, very importantly, God wants us to do good science, and yet He has made a world where beauty is a guide to truth in science, especially in physics. And artistry is good. So God is an artist. And artists, arguably, make things beautiful. Abstracta, on the other hand, are grounded in God, because God is ultimately beautiful, and abstracta are maybe aspects of His mind. So we would expect beauty in the world of abstracta if God exists. So beauty, I think, is more likely to be found, instantiated, and observed if God exists than if God does not, and hence it provides some evidence for the existence of God. I think the conceptual argument from beauty is in some ways actually stronger than the argument from morality. Why? I think the divinity theory of beauty is a better theory than divine command theory is. And I think they're pretty good non-theistic moral theories. But I don't think there are pretty good non-theistic aesthetic theories. On the other hand, subjectivism is more attractive for beauty than for morality. And moral reasons, perhaps, are overriding in a way that makes them more mysterious. So in some ways, maybe the argument from beauty is not as strong as the moral argument that is more familiar to us. On the other hand, the argument from the sense of beauty, I think, is stronger than the argument from the moral sense, because the evolutionary benefits of a moral sense are much easier to find, while those of beauty are much more mysterious. What about the problem of evil? There's an analog to it, and it's the problem of ugliness. And it sure looks like there are things that are ugly, as you can see. So design arguments for the existence of God are weakened by arguments from evil, or maybe even overthrown, some people would say. Are arguments from beauty similarly damaged by ugliness? I don't think so. It's a lot easier to give an Augustinian, holistic solution to the problem of ugliness. Artists use ugly things as parts of greater works, and in the light of the whole, an isolated ugliness can be unimportant or even beneficial. Look at this ugly hand here, holding a stick. It looks like, I don't know, some kind of football maybe? I don't know. It's a very strange shape, this hand. It's not much of a hand. But let's zoom out, and zoom out. There's actually a reason why the hand is so poorly formed. The hand is physically in the middle, in the central portion of the painting. If it was well formed and clear, it would draw our attention. And draw our attention away from the things that are significant in the paintings. The two persons, the umbrella, the clouds, the light. It is important for this painting that the hand not draw our attention. So it is very plausible that often beautiful things, that ugly things are subsumed into a more beautiful whole. In the moral case, this is a risky kind of argument to make, for it risks treating the suffering of individuals as means, treating them as means. It is risky, I think, to judge an artist untalented on the basis of a part, as the Monet painting showed. In much of the best art, the whole can overcome expectations coming from the part. But we can say this, an artist who has talent in a small part has talent. Look at the talent in this painting. But now let's zoom out. Wait, it's completely transformed. This picturesque town, somewhat grayish, is just background for this amazing dynamic play of colors. The meaning of it has completely changed. The meaning, we are focused on something else. The miraculous drawing up of fish. And yet, even from the part, we could see talent in the painter, even though we couldn't see the meaning of the whole. So we can more confidently make positive judgments on the basis of a part of a work of art than on the basis, whereas the negative ones on the basis of merely a part. So there's an asymmetry between ugliness and beauty. Between ugliness and evil. Arguments from ugliness are much weaker than arguments from evil. I think arguments from beauty do provide evidence for the existence of God. In some ways they are stronger than moral arguments, and in other ways.
Thank you very much. That was Alexander Pruss from Baylor University, Waco, Texas. I can see that Alex is already with us. I think it's early morning in Texas right now. So thank you, Alex, for joining so early. And now we can kick off with the questions. Questions to Alex. I can see Daniel. Please unmute yourself, ask the question, then Parker, and go on.
Thank you, Alex. I'll try to ask this question without waking this baby here. And it's more of, I just want to hear your thoughts a bit more on sort of the perennial worry about participation metaphysic. It seems like, from where I sit, is defined by participation. Everything's going to be defined by participation. Participating in God in some sense. How in your mind do you avoid the collapsism on the one hand, or else on the other just saying the phrase divine by participation is simply trivial? So, I mean, if there was some reliable mechanism by which we could all perceive the divine in everyone, say something like Vedanta meditation or something like that. Well, it seems like there's at least going to be a phenomenological, if not ontological monism there that's going to strongly pull us in that direction. But otherwise, at least it seems to me that divine by participation is just loose speak. We don't really mean that they're divine in any sense. If by divine I mean which create which creates and sustains anything by participation. But if you want to say yes, then it seems like you're back to the pantheistic problem. So I'd just like to hear your comments on that, if that makes sense.
Daniel, I think we couldn't understood you, all of what you said, because of the internet connection. So could you please type the question on the chat? I don't know what, Alex, did you understood the question?
I got portions of it, I think, but most of it broke up.
Okay, please type the question and we can ask another question. I saw Parker having question.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, mine might be, from what I caught, very similar to Daniel's. I'm wondering about the mechanism of participation and how this might avoid what seems to be a possible collapse if you involve the doctrine of divine simplicity. So if you had any thoughts on that, that would be lovely to hear.
Could you explain a little more how you think simplicity would lead to a collapse?
Sure. Well, if the forms, so to speak, would be God himself, so if perhaps justice or beauty itself, by virtue of the doctrine of simplicity, are simply God himself, it seems that things that we would want to label as justice would simply be God. So I'm wondering, because I know that perhaps I'm unclear on the mechanism of participation and how to distinguish participation from justice or beauty itself.
Yeah, so I do think that the more I think about this, the more I think it's hard to deny that the view does imply that everything is beautiful in some way. I think it implies that everything is, and this may be an answer in part to Daniel as well, the parts that I heard, that everything is beautiful insofar as it exists. But there are going to be degrees of participation, and I think the diversity there is going to be on the side of creatures. We're going to have something like Aquinas's story that the simple God, though simple, and his perfection is infinite and can only be reflected in finite things through a diversity of things. So there will be many beautiful things. But they will vary, I think, in the degree to which they are beautiful, because they will vary in the degree to which they participate, and participate in ways that are sensible to us.
Okay.
So let me look at Daniel's question and see if
could you please read it, or should I read it for you, just for the people who are not present in the chat?
Briefly, when you speak of everything being divine by participation, how do you avoid collapsing into pantheism on the one hand? Parenthesis, if there's a mechanism by which we can perceive our divinity by participation, this threatens at least phenomenological, if not ontological, monism, or triviality on the other. I.e., if divine is identical with that which creates and sustains all things, I don't think in any way that which creates and sustains all, not even by participation. Hope that makes sense. Thanks. Okay, so that is actually a different question from the one that I thought I heard from the little bits that came by. Let me think. Yeah, so let's see. I don't want to have the divine here be defined as that which creates and sustains all things. That I think won't help here. I I guess my favorite kinds of definitions of God are ones that God has all perfections. And being creator and sustainer of all is, well, actually, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't like that. Being creator and sustainer of all is one of the perfections. I think it's a perfection that we participate in when we create things, in turn, sort of particularly relevant, in fact, perfection to artistic creation. The artist creates things. And while we don't sustain all, so we don't create all, but we co-create some, and we don't sustain all, but we co-sustain some in a very limited kind of way in which we help our neighbor to survive and keep ourselves in existence. Why call, now you're asking as a follow-up, why call that divine? Well, I should say I'm using, divine here in this weaker kind of sense. I mean, this is not divine in the sense of being identical with God. That would indeed be pantheism. This is like, it's hot. I think it's sort of somewhere between the divine cheesecake that you might see advertised in a store window and the God became man that we might become God that St. Athanasius talks about. I think it's closer to the second, but I think there is a kind of natural, through participation, a natural way in which we can say that we are all divine, or all things are divine, that is no more pantheistic than Athanasius's claim, but doesn't involve grace in the way that Athanasius's claim does. So I think there will be levels, and the Athanasian kind of participation in the divine will be a higher kind of participation. It's wrought by the incarnation.
Okay. Daniel, I hope it is sufficient. Now we have a question from Marcin.
Yeah. Actually, the question was partially answered by pointing to a higher kind of participation, because I actually was quite interested in what you said as repeating a path which was already followed in civilization and which imbues, in a way, all our thinking about art. Because what you say about participation, showing up, relies on Platonic view that beauty shows itself and shows through itself the formal order of things. And this idea was followed up by Neoplatonics, especially by Plotinus on the one hand, and on the other hand by later Platonics like Hermeticists. And they reached quite a different idea, quite a different conclusion. Their conclusion was idolatry, proud idolatry. Because when this world is formless, when form as participated is shown in the sensibles, then when we add form, when we create something like, not a mug, but a beautiful statue, which participates in the forms that make up the divine order of the world, then this is a kind of not only more beautiful, but a more divine thing. And in the Asclepius, the Hermetic treatise from 2nd century AD, most probably, it's clearly said that when we make a statue, this statue is divine and may be worshipped and serves us as God, because it participates in the divine. In a sense, this statue is like Leni Riefenstahl's movie. It participates in the divine order of this world, the created order, in adds more order when we see chaos, and then it is used as a kind of tool of moving this world around. Is it really or magically for hermeticists, or through people's mind in the view of ideologists? In any way, this kind of participation, the participation created order, points only to created gods. This is my problem. So you need to define this higher kind of participation very precisely, so that it's not a kind of participation such as Platonics defined it, which is a participation very similar to participation in laws of nature, when you have one law of gravitation, which is in deep level a purely mathematical law ruling the quarks, and where this law imbues every point and informs every point of reality, being all the same, the one and the same law. This law can be viewed as divine because it's more stable than us, but it's not God. So a participation in beauty of God must be different. It's my point.
Yes, so that's very interesting. And I agree that there is a danger there. Something I thought about including, but I didn't because of issues of time, is this question whether part of the problem of an interesting aesthetic aspect of the problem of evil is the way that beauty can lead us to focus on the creature in a way that distracts us from the creator. And I think that's a real danger. We see that in idolatry to some degree. So I don't know how much, like in literal idolatry, I don't know how much of it is in fact a focus on the beauty of, say, the statue as much as on, I mean, some idols are in fact not very beautiful indeed, and many non-idol statues are much more beautiful than many idols. But it can be beautiful and can draw us away from that. But we also see it in things like the way that the beauty of nature can draw people away from God, away from love, even love of fellow human beings. You've got like the radical environmentalists who would like there to be no human beings at all, and who are not recognizing the greater kind of, I think, beauty that is found in human relationships. So I think there is a real danger there. I think the danger, though, does in fact suggest does provide some confirmation for a theory on which beauty is a divine participation, precisely because it's, let me think, early in the morning for me. Well, because it shows that we are reacting to it, that people do in fact react to beauty as if it was divine. And I think the explanation of my story is going to be, well, they do this, but they lose sight of the fact that participation crucially has a pointing beyond, as a kind of, it does point, it's divine by participation. And it's not like, it is a little bit Platonic, but it is more like the Platonism of Plato than of contemporary analytic philosophy. So in contemporary analytic philosophy, when things participate in a form, they've got all of the reality there. So a green thing is just green. Or for Plato, the things that participate in the forms, they're reminders of this much greater reality. And then all the forms are sort of other than the form of the good, are reminders of the form of the good. So there, in Plato, we do have some of that pointing beyond. We may lose some of that in the Neoplatonists. I think it's still there, this pointing beyond. And I think it's the pointing beyond that we need to safeguard.
No, just one remark, very short. In Neoplatonists, actually, you need to go beyond that level. It's one of steps that lead beyond created order or the generated order. That's all.
Alex, any response to that?
I will defer to Marcin on the history there.
Okay. We have also a few questions from the stream on YouTube and Facebook. Let me just briefly ask them. The first question is, God and Beauty, what a fantastic lecture. How beauty is changing our relation with God. Alex, would you like to respond?
I'm not sure what to say. I mean, in a variety of ways. I was focusing on the positive ways in which it draws us. It points beyond this world and points, and all beauty points to God, and therefore it sort of is divine by pointing and divine by participation. But then Marcin's question also points to the danger in which we can, you've got the pointing finger and then you can focus on the finger itself too much. And I think the right metaphysics of participation, which is something that I wish I had more to say about than, just what one gets from a superficial reading of Aquinas, say, I think is going to give a good balance to there, but that's a future project.
Okay, one or two questions more. The question from Balint Bekefi he's also our speaker. Why think there is an underlying commonality shared by such diverse instances of beauty? In example, abstract mathematics and art. Can't the category beauty be a merely contingent semantic phenomenon?
I think it's so you could have a disjunctive account of beauty on which it's there's beauty 1, beauty 2, up to beauty n. I think that faces the same kind of problem that we would have in the theory of mind if we said, okay, what is pain in humans? It is the firing of C fibers. What is pain in Martians? Well, it's the activation of some other kind of brain structure. What is pain in Vulcans? It is the activation of some yet other brain structure. And what is pain in intelligent computers? It is a certain kind of computational state. And there's something missing in that account. And one of the things that's missing in it is an answer to the question of what pain is in species that we hadn't thought of yet. And I think there is such a thing as a type of beauty. I think it's very plausible, given the diversity in beauty and the way that our minds can be opened to new types of beauty that we have not yet experienced. And then we say, oh yes, of course, that is beautiful too, when our eyes have been opened. For example, a lot of people do not experience mathematical beauty ever, and some of them, they can when they have an excellent teacher, an excellent mathematics teacher who opens their eyes to this new form of beauty, and they say, oh yes, of course, that is beautiful. And I don't think they're thinking this is like, it's just another disjunct. Then there would be something arbitrary. They've discovered something. This is also a form of beauty. And it seems it would seem to me very implausible to think we've discovered all the forms of beauty, and now we have and beauty itself is like the disjunction of all the ones that we've discovered so far. It has to be a concept, I think, that can apply to things that we have not discovered, perhaps are even unable to observe.
Okay, thanks very much. And the very last question from the stream is, do we need God to define beauty and ugliness? Do we need a concept of creator for it? So in philosophical language, do we need theism for the aesthetic theory? I think you already did shed some light on it, but could you please answer to this?
Yeah, need is a strong term. I was arguing that this is a good theory of beauty, that it has some difficulties. I think its main difficulty is the one that came up already in the questions, namely that it has the danger of making everything beautiful and has dangers of triviality, as in Daniel's question. But it's a good theory. All the others are not so good. I think, are not as good. I don't have an argument that it's the only possible theory. And even within the theory, as far as it goes, I haven't given an argument, and I don't yet have a great argument that it has to take a theistic form, that it couldn't take a deistic form or a pantheistic form or maybe a panentheistic form. So I'm actually not sure what the difference between pan and theism and theism is. So I think there could be other kinds of ex-theism kind of theories that it would work with. So I myself am a theist.